The Hejaz Mountains have stood where they stand for 30 million years. Born from the cataclysmic rift that tore the Arabian Plate away from Africa and ripped the Red Sea into existence, these granite ridges have endured every force the planet could deploy against them. Wind erosion grinding at their faces for millennia, flash floods carving violent gullies through their flanks, tectonic stress fracturing their foundations from below. The Nabateans carved tombs into their stone at Hegra 2,000 years ago and vanished into history. The Leonites built a kingdom in their valleys at Daden and were swallowed by time. The Ottoman Empire laid a railway across their foothills and watched the desert bury the tracks. Civilizations rise and collapse against these mountains. The rock endures. It does not negotiate. It does not yield. And for 30 million years, it has answered every human ambition with the same indifferent, geological reply: you are temporary, I am not. Any sober geological assessment of the Hejaz Range produces one unambiguous recommendation: leave it alone. The bedrock is Precambrian crystalline granite, among the hardest, densest, most blast-resistant material on the surface of the Earth. Summer temperatures on the exposed ridgelines exceed 50 degrees Celsius, warping steel and degrading equipment seals within weeks. The Red Sea Rift System, the very tectonic engine that created these mountains, remains violently active, generating seismic tremors that shake the region's foundations with unpredictable regularity. Rainfall arrives not as gentle hydration, but as sudden, catastrophic flash floods that rip through wadis with the force of concrete, carrying boulders the size of trucks and shredding anything that was foolish enough to be built in their path. The ultraviolet bombardment is among the most savage on the planet, disintegrating polymer coatings and adhesive compounds at rates that halve the lifespan of standard construction materials. Building here is punishing. Reshaping the mountains themselves is an act of geological vandalism that every principle of cost, physics, and humility advises against. In 2017, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stood before a room of investors and announced that Saudi Arabia would do precisely what every geological and engineering principle warned against. They would not build around the Hejaz Mountains. They would not tunnel modestly beneath them. They would reshape them. They would carve through them, excavate into them, hollow out their peaks, flood their valleys with artificial lakes, and construct, from the mutilated carcass of a 30-million-year-old mountain range, an entirely new geography, one containing a linear city 170 kilometers long, a mountain ski resort where snow has never naturally fallen, and a coastal industrial port on a scale never before attempted. The investment envelope, $500 billion. The earth-moving requirement, 500 million cubic meters of rock and soil, enough material to bury Manhattan under 6 meters of rubble. They named it NEOM, and they began detonating. This is the story of how the wealthiest petroleum state on Earth declared war on its own geology, mobilized the largest earth-moving operation in human history, and began physically dismantling a mountain range that has existed since before the human species evolved, only to discover that the distance between moving a mountain and building a civilization in the hole you leave behind may be the most expensive, most humbling, and most devastating lesson in the history of construction. To understand the scale of violence being inflicted upon this landscape, you must first understand what the rock is. The Hejaz Range is not sedimentary limestone. It is not sandstone. It is crystalline shield rock, the exposed roots of a continent formed between 870 and 550 million years ago during the assembly of the Arabian Shield. This is some of the oldest, hardest, most geologically stubborn material on Earth. It does not crack cleanly. It does not yield to pressure. It shatters unpredictably, fracturing along ancient fault lines that no survey can fully map, releasing stored tectonic stress and explosive bursts that can collapse tunnel faces and destabilize excavation walls without warning. Drilling into it destroys equipment at staggering rates. Drill bits designed for weeks of service are consumed in days, and every cubic meter removed must be blasted, crushed, loaded, and hauled away by truck through a landscape where ambient heat routinely exceeds the safe operating threshold for both human beings and heavy machinery. The desperation behind this assault on geology was not architectural ego, it was existential arithmetic. Saudi Arabia's entire modern civilization is sustained by a single depleting commodity, crude oil. The kingdom understood with surgical clarity that within decades, the global energy transition would erode the foundations of its wealth. Vision 2030, the Crown Prince's sweeping transformation plan, demanded that Saudi Arabia reinvent itself as a destination for technology, tourism, and foreign investment before the petroleum economy collapsed. NEOM was the ultimate demonstration, a futuristic mega-development that would prove the kingdom could build anything, anywhere, regardless of what the geography said. The Line, a 170-kilometer mirrored city, would be the centerpiece. Trojena, a mountain resort with an artificial freshwater lake and a ski slope carved into peaks where temperatures can still plunge below freezing in winter, would be the crown jewel of impossibility. The equation was existential: diversify or die, move the mountain or watch the kingdom calcify into irrelevance. The weapons deployed against the Hejaz were unprecedented in the history of earth moving. At peak operations, 260 excavators and 2,000 trucks operated around the clock across the NEOM construction zone, moving approximately 2 million cubic meters of earth per week. The drill and blast method was chosen over tunnel boring machines because the granite was too hard and too fractured for mechanical cutting. Instead, workers drilled patterns of boreholes into the rock face, loaded them with industrial explosives, and detonated. At the Trojena mountain resort alone, the B3 tunnel connecting the lake access road to the Vault Resort complex required over 58 tons of explosives across more than 130 individual blasts, excavating over 90,000 cubic meters of mountain. The broader vault excavation consumed 7 million cubic meters of rock out of a planned 8.88 million, an open wound carved into the side of a mountain that had been standing since before dinosaurs existed. For the line's foundation trench, specialized piling rigs drove over 4,500 foundation piles to depths of 70 meters, punching through layers of compacted desert sediment and fractured bedrock. The earth did not go quietly. Equipment failures cascaded, drill bits shattered against unexpected fault lines, flash floods roared through excavation zones, filling foundation trenches with debris in hours. The mountain fought back with every tool geology had given it. The statistics, stripped of their corporate packaging, are staggering. 500 million cubic meters of total earth moving, a volume equivalent to constructing 200 Great Pyramids of Giza. The Trojena Resort's artificial freshwater lake would have stretched 2.8 kilometers across, retained by a system of 3 engineered dams built into the mountain walls. The line itself, 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, would have contained more steel than 100 Eiffel Towers and enough concrete to pave a 6-lane highway from Riyadh to Moscow. The original investment envelope of $500 billion was, by multiple independent audits, a fantasy. Internal estimates placed the true cost of the full specification at figures that defied credible budgeting, with completion timelines stretching into the 2080s. The initial assault produced moments of genuine, intoxicating triumph. Foundation piles pierced the bedrock. Tunnel faces advanced through the granite. The vault excavation milestone, 7 million cubic meters removed, was celebrated as proof that the mountain could be defeated. International media broadcast images of the colossal construction site, with its armada of yellow machines clawing at the earth under floodlights that turned the desert night into artificial daylight. The Crown Prince toured the site, investors circled. The narrative was triumphant certainty. Saudi Arabia was building the future, and the mountains were yielding. Then the economics, the politics, and the geology began their coordinated counterattack. By 2025, the project's financial architecture was buckling. The costs of fighting Precambrian granite at industrial scale in 50-degree heat across a seismically active zone had consumed budgets at rates that no sovereign wealth fund, even one exceeding $1.7 trillion, could sustain indefinitely. In March 2026, NEOM exercised termination for convenience clauses on major Trojena construction contracts, including the artificial lake, the 3 dams, and the Beau Hotel, despite work being approximately 30% complete. Billions of dollars of partially completed infrastructure abandoned on a mountainside. The 2029 Asian Winter Games, which Trojena was to host, were relocated to Almaty, Kazakhstan. Funding for the line was suspended. The original vision of 9 million residents was slashed first to 1.5 million, then to projections as low as 100,000. Of the planned 170 kilometers of linear city, only 2.4 kilometers of foundation work had been completed, 1.4% of the original ambition. Jump to the present day. The Hejaz Mountains remain, as they have remained for 30 million years, scarred now, gouged, blasted, tunneled, and partially hollowed, but fundamentally undefeated. 7 million cubic meters of rock were removed from the Trojena vault. Foundation piles stand in rows across 2.4 kilometers of desert trench. Tunnels bore partway into granite and stop. Partially constructed dams sit at 30% completion, their reinforcing steel exposed to the corrosive desert air and the abrasive sandstorms that grind coatings to dust. The construction equipment, the excavators, the piling rigs, the explosive magazines, sits in various states of demobilization. The mountain has not reclaimed the scars yet, but it has time. It has always had time. The paradox is as old as the desert itself. To the crown prince and the vision architects who conceived NEOM, moving the mountain was the ultimate proof that oil wealth could purchase geological obedience, that enough money, enough machinery, and enough explosive force could reshape the physical earth to match a human blueprint. To the geologists, the structural engineers, and the blast specialists who actually stood at the rock face, the mountain was never an obstacle to be removed. It was an adversary to be negotiated with, carefully, expensively, and with the permanent understanding that granite does not forget. Every blast leaves fracture networks that propagate invisibly through the rock. Every excavation redistributes stress loads that can trigger collapses years after the last truck has departed. What the Hejaz teaches is not a lesson about money or ambition or engineering capability. The technology to move a mountain exists. The explosives exist. The excavators exist. What does not exist, what has never existed, is the ability to move a mountain and then command the hole you have carved to behave as if it were solid ground. The rock remembers every blast. The fracture networks propagate. The desert heat cycles expand and contract every exposed surface. The flash floods fill every depression. And the tectonic engine that built the Hejaz 30 million years ago continues to grind, shift, and shudder beneath every foundation pile, every tunnel lining, every dam wall that was poured into its wounds. Because sometimes, in the blinding, furnace-white silence of the Saudi Arabian desert, standing in a trench where a mountain used to be, surrounded by the ghostly geometry of half-finished foundations and abandoned tunnel portals, there is a vast, expensive, almost unbearable reckoning. A reckoning between the human conviction that geography is merely a problem to be solved with sufficient capital, the mountain's 30 million year indifference to every civilization that has ever scratched at its surface, and the hundreds of billions of dollars, the millions of cubic meters of shattered granite, and the thousands of human lives spent laboring in punishing heat that now lie suspended, silently, irrecoverably in the widening fracture between what was promised and what the rock allowed.